The 1995 E3 marked a pivotal moment in the evolution of video games, fundamentally changing how the industry communicated its news to audiences. Prior to this event, there was no internationally recognized gathering solely focused on significant video game announcements in Europe. For instance, the European Computer Trade Show took place, which was important for the tech sector but had a broader scope that didn't give video games the attention they were starting to require. Some companies attempted to host smaller events independently, but these initiatives lacked the necessary impact and visibility. During that period, the Consumer Electronics Show was the main hub for tech presentations, showcasing everything from the latest television models to innovative gadgets. However, the portion dedicated to video games was always minimal and often overlooked, as the interest of attendees and media was primarily directed towards advancements in phones, computers, and other electronics. Interactive entertainment was largely ignored. The audience at the CES showed little enthusiasm for video games, causing the industry to be eclipsed by the major announcements from other technology sectors. This indifference was even evident in the behavior of the event organizers. Those who failed to view video games as a significant aspect of the event, including game developers and console manufacturers, were often relegated to dark, less frequented areas of the show, resulting in clear neglect. A notable example was Sega, a company that made a significant impact on the industry with the launch of the Genesis at a CES event. Unfortunately, Sega was assigned to attend outside for its major presentation, where rain ultimately ruined the showcase of its flagship console. Such occurrences were not uncommon, as video games simply did not receive the recognition they warranted at CES. Over time, this disparity in treatment led to considerable resentment among industry participants, who felt sidelined at an event that failed to allocate them the space and significance that the expanding video game market demanded. Although the public's interest was starting to rise, it was not always portrayed positively, highlighting the urgent need for a dedicated and exclusive event. In the early 1990s, the increasing popularity of video games brought not only excitement to households, but also apprehension among parents and lawmakers in the United States. Titles with violent and inappropriate content became focal points of public concern, particularly in a society beginning to acknowledge that video games were no longer merely children's toys, but a new form of interactive entertainment affecting a wider audience. Media outlets at the time reported on games like Mortal Kombat and Night Trap, which featured more realistic graphics and violence, raising alarm among legislators. The issue gained such traction that it quickly captured the attention of the government, which began pressing the industry for prompt action. The government was straightforward in its demands, insisting that the industry establish a self-regulation system to manage video game content, or face the prospect of laws and regulations being imposed. This ultimatum put leading industry figures in a precarious position. Companies like Nintendo and Sega, fierce competitors at the time, realized that despite their rivalry, they shared a mutual interest in preventing government intervention. If the government took control of video game regulation, it could impose restrictions that would hinder creative freedom and market growth. It was this shared apprehension that prompted companies to temporarily set aside their differences and unite in a common cause. This collaboration resulted in the formation of the Interactive Digital Software Association, now known as the Entertainment Software Association, along with the establishment of the ESRB rating system, which categorizes video games based on their content to help parents make informed choices. This system not only alleviated concerns from Congress, but also created a framework that allowed the industry to expand without the constraints of direct government oversight. However, the introduction of the ESRB and the partnership between companies like Sega and Nintendo also paved the way for something much larger. This collective effort ignited the possibility of organizing a dedicated event for the video game industry, a concept that had never been realized before. The initial idea came from Pat Farrell, the founder of GamePro magazine, who recognized that the industry was ready to take this leap forward. With his connections at IDG, the organization behind the Macworld Expo, he knew that an event solely focused on video games could become monumental. However, garnering unanimous support from all companies proved challenging. For instance, Nintendo and Microsoft were initially hesitant and preferred to continue their participation at CES, which had historically provided them visibility. Despite these early reservations, Farrell's vision began to resonate as more developers and key manufacturers committed to this new initiative. The pressure mounted on companies reluctant to participate. Ultimately, the scale of the event became undeniable, and both Nintendo and Microsoft had no choice but to embrace this new chapter for the industry. Thus, the stage was set for what would become the first E3, an event destined to alter the trajectory of video games forever. Pat Farrell, the visionary behind the inaugural E3, successfully negotiated a pivotal agreement with the Interactive Digital Software Association, solidifying the event's place in video game history. With this agreement, E3 was officially scheduled for May 1995 at the iconic Los Angeles Convention Center. The timing was perfect, as the industry was undergoing radical transformation, with an exciting yet uncertain future on the horizon. In the mid-90s, the video game market was poised for a technological revolution, propelled by the transition to three-dimensional graphics, which marked a fundamental change in how players engage with virtual environments. At that time, the Super Nintendo still reigned as the most popular console in North America, a true giant that had shaped an entire era in video gaming. The Super Nintendo's dominance was now being challenged as expectations shifted towards the next generation of consoles by 1994. Both Sega and Sony had launched their groundbreaking Saturn and PlayStation consoles in Japan, marking the beginning of the three-dimensional graphics era. These consoles promised an unparalleled immersive experience with games that pushed technological boundaries, and the public had a clear idea of what these new systems could deliver. E3 1995 provided the ideal platform for these two titans to unveil their offerings in the North American market, where both consoles were anticipated to launch by the end of the year. The anticipation was tangible, and the industry's attention was riveted on Sega and Sony as they prepared for what was shaping up to be the ultimate showdown for dominance in the new generation. Meanwhile, Nintendo, although still in control with the Super Nintendo, was also developing its own foray into 3D gaming with the much-anticipated Ultra 64 console. However, just days before E3 kicked off, the company shocked everyone by announcing a delay in the console's launch until the following year. This revelation altered the landscape of the event, intensifying the focus on the fierce rivalry between Sega and Sony. While other consoles like the 3DO and the Atari Jaguar were present, the real clash was unmistakably between these two giants, each representing the future of the industry. Thus, E3 1995 transformed into a battleground where expectations and the initial strides of a new gaming era would be determined. E3 in 1995 was distinctly divided into two major experiences: the exhibition hall and the conferences. In the exhibition hall, each developer showcased their full range of demos and prototypes within meticulously crafted booths designed to highlight the latest advancements in games and technology. These booths provided the attendees with the perfect opportunity to engage directly with the next generation of consoles, try unreleased titles, and observe how the industry was beginning to harness the power of 3D graphics. The atmosphere was electric, filled with vibrant lights, massive screens, and immersive sound that captivated attendees in an unprecedented audio-visual spectacle. However, while the action and innovation unfolded in the exhibition hall, the real revelations emerged during another segment: the conferences. The 1995 E3 conferences quickly became the centerpiece of the event, where representatives from major video game companies took the stage to announce thrilling news, ranging from new console launches to upcoming titles that would shape the industry's future. Today, it's almost unimaginable to think of an event of this scale without the option to follow it live via online streaming or social media. However, in 1995, that simply wasn't a reality. Live broadcasts were non-existent, and channels like G4, which would later cover the event, were not even in the pipeline. The only way to witness the announcements was to be present in person. For everyone else, the news arrived weeks later through video game magazines that published articles summarizing the key moments from E3. What makes E3 fascinating since 1995 is how, despite its significant influence, it was far from the media spectacle we see today. Back then, the presentations were not crafted to enthrall the general public. There were no celebrity guests, musical acts, or elaborate montages featuring live gameplay. Instead, they were straightforward and unembellished presentations devoid of the flashy elements that would come to define E3 in later years. In fact, most of the conferences weren't even officially recorded. The few existing videos come from attendees who, equipped with home video cameras, captured moments that are now part of gaming history. These images, although often blurry and of poor quality, provide a glimpse into a more austere version of E3, showcasing an industry still in the process of finding its identity and style. Unlike contemporary conferences that aim to generate excitement and encourage pre-orders, the The presentations of 1995 had a distinctly different focus. The majority of attendees were industry professionals, including retailers, developers, marketing teams, investors, and some journalists. These events weren't designed to wow the average gamer, but rather to inform those directly involved in the distribution and development of video games. By today's standards, these conferences might appear dry or even tedious, but at the time, there was no established model to emulate. It was uncharted territory where companies were experimenting with what would ultimately evolve into an annual tradition for the industry. The first E3 in 1995 signified the dawn of a new era for video gaming. For the first time, developers, manufacturers, and distributors had a dedicated space to showcase their innovations and envision the future of interactive entertainment. Although those inaugural conferences may seem modest compared to the media extravaganza that E3 would later become, they laid the groundwork for what would grow into the most anticipated annual event in the gaming community.